Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer, and today we are here back for episode 2 of the A to Z challenge series, where now we are on to a Manator of Nubia, which is personally actually one of my favorite civs in the game, and it's a civ that I previously used to win over $1,000 in the Super Gaming Championship, also known as the Club Esports Civ 6 Invitational, which is not that big of a deal, but I continue to meme to this day. Quick plug before we get into the video, in the Discord, the community Discord, which you can find the link for in the description below, I have created a channel for the A to Z challenge, so I'm going to give my game seed in there and the game settings, and then you guys, if you want to play along, do your own A to Z challenge, go ahead on into that channel, and then, you know, put some fun facts about your game. If you win, if you lose, you know, what your turn of victory was, some highlights of the game. You can put that in this Discord channel. That's what I've made it for, so I don't believe anyone's used it yet, but if you're interested in doing that, playing along the A to Z challenge with me, go ahead, join the Discord, and go ahead to the A to Z challenge channel. So for the setup of this game, things were pretty simple. Of course, deity difficulty. I went for continents, map type, standard size, monopolies and corporations, and secret societies for our extra game modes. The game seed, of course, is shown right there and will be in the video description. And what do you say, let's go ahead and get right into this. So Nubia, I think, is actually a very strong civilization. They have a big power spike early on with the Patati Archer, and one thing that you should do is, if possible, you should rush your nearest neighbor with the Patati Archer, because it's a really strong early game unit. And when you play Nubia, I think you have two options for the early game. You can either go for a religion and then, you know, use that to augment maybe a science game or a culture game, or you can go for the early Patati Archer rush. You cannot do both. It's too slow to get a religion and also try to do the Patati Archer rush, at least on deity. So for this game, I really wanted to do the Patati Archer rush, so that's kind of what I was planning for whenever I started out here. So got a pretty decent spawn. We actually have a nice 2-3 tile right next to the capital on the deer. We have some floodplains. The one thing that is bad is that I wasn't next to a desert tile. So I could have I could have moved over one tile and settled on the floodplain tile. So the reason you want to be next to a desert tile is just so you can put one Nubian pyramid next to your capital and get the extra bonus for producing districts. But I didn't want to do that in this game because the 2-3 tile was just straight up better than getting that bonus towards the district production. So I chose to stay and settle in place and go from there. So I guess as a whole, as Nubia, you do want to be settling kind of on the edge of the desert, because desert tiles are still pretty garbage whenever you play Nubia. Nubia can make them a little bit better with the Nubian pyramid, but still not significantly better. So ideally you want to be settling next to the desert, so that way you can get the extra production bonus on districts from having a Nubian pyramid adjacent to your capital, but then you can still get some good yields from something like plains or grassland tiles. So for my first research in this game, since I was planning on going for the Patati Archer rush, I immediately went for animal husbandry, because whenever you're going to go an early game rush, you need to go all out and just go straight for the tech that you need. So of course I want to get the archery. And then since I have both sheep and deer, and I'm getting animal husbandry first, it's actually a pretty good scenario to go for an early game builder. I also do have the rice that I can put a farm on. And with all of those tiles, then I'll obviously have some really good yields in the capital. So, although I would normally go a scout, I decided to go for a builder in this one, just because I think with the bonus resources that we had in this game, it was generally a pretty good idea. Did some exploring with the warrior. You can see that we have a bit of desert floodplains here. I found a barbarian encampment, which I, of course, had to beat up to try to clear. And I also met Levanta, which is a religious city-state. So if we're going to go for a religion, it is nice to meet them. The only problem is that I didn't get the first meet, so I wasn't able to get the one free faith in my capital. The one free faith is nice because it allows you to get your pantheon a lot faster, but unfortunately someone else had already met them, so I wasn't able to get that. A few turns later, I finished my builder, and I went to go make a camp on the deer, and then for my second build, I immediately went for a settler. I would say in probably like 9 games out of 10, I go for settler as my second build. I just think having a second city out early is super strong. 1, because you can build up the city a lot faster, and 2, because if you're going to go for a military game, having 2 cities producing units makes it so that you can get a lot more military strength a lot faster than if you just try to produce units from your capital alone. I eventually finally cleared the Barbarian camp, and I found Sanguine Pact. I didn't really want Sanguine Pact. I really actually wanted to go for Hermetic Order this game, but unfortunately I did not, and we'll see exactly why that is in just a bit. So instead I just used the Governor title to get Pingala, because getting Pingala early on in the capital is pretty decent, because getting 10% or 15%, whatever it is, extra science and culture does matter a bit early on. I mean, it matters later on as well, but it is something that is a bit impactful in the early game as well. For my starting policies here, I went with the ones that I basically always take, Discipline and God King, especially since I wanted to get a Pantheon. In the event that I had to go for a religion this game, if the Patati Archer Rush didn't work out, I want to make sure that I have the Pantheon backup, or the religious game backup to fall on, so that way that can supplement my science game that I'm actually trying to win. Eventually settled my second city down here in the floodplains, and as I mentioned earlier, settling on the edge of the desert. That way I can get a Nubian pyramid adjacent to the city, but can still get a lot better yields from having the plains tiles and the plains hills and stuff like that. I was also starting to get a little bit of a barbarian problem here, as you can see, so I wanted to make sure that I got some military units to be able to deal with this. And at this point in the game, since I hadn't met anybody yet, I really wanted to start researching astrology, because I was thinking that maybe the Patati Archer Rush wasn't going to work out. So if you're playing Nubia and you don't meet anybody in the first, 25 or 30 turns, you should definitely start thinking about pivoting to the religious game to supplement your science victory instead of going for the Patati Archer Rush. So I upgraded one of my slingers into the Patati Archer, which does give me a nice little bit of arrow score as well. And then it allowed me to do quite a bit of damage to these barbarians. So, I mean, like, as you can see here, the Patati Archer basically one-hit kills enemy slingers, and it does a lot of damage to warriors as well. So, I mean, even as a defensive unit early on, the Patati Archer is super strong. And since it was now almost turn 40 and I still hadn't met anybody yet, I decided it was time to pivot for the religious game. So I got my holy site down. I wanted to start making some great profit points. And whenever you're at this point in the game, you have to hurry a bit to get the religion, because if you don't start going at it from turn 1, it can be a little bit difficult, and sometimes you can end up without being able to get a great profit if you don't prioritize this super hard. I did also get a second settler out, luckily, before I had to go for the religious stuff, so I made sure that I went and settled that, and I figured that what a better spot to show off Nubia than by settling this one right in the middle of the desert on these floodplains, and I figured maybe we could do some cool stuff with desert folklore here, and work ethic. That's actually a really strong combo. You get a lot of extra faith out of that and a lot of extra production as well, so that's the strategy that I wanted to go for this game. I wanted to go desert folklore plus work ethic, get a lot of extra production, and then play a religion and science game. A few turns later, I was able to choose my Pantheon, and of course Desert Folklore was already taken, which made me quite upset, because I was basically basing my entire game plan off of Desert Folklore, so I was not happy that I wasn't able to get it. But seeing that I had this interesting, I mean, all of my cities were on floodplains, and 2 of them were on desert floodplains, I thought it would be really cool actually to go for Lady of the Reeds and Marshes, which gives you +2 production on desert floodplains. I figured this with the Nubian Pyramid could maybe give some interesting yields, so it's what I went to go for. It's not one I basically ever take, but I figured, this game's already not going exactly to plan. Why not change it up and do something that I've never done before? And this does actually it makes the desert tiles with wheat on the floodplains have 3 food and 2 production. So this actually makes Faros a pretty strong city that actually was able to grow a lot faster than I originally thought it was going to be able to. We moved into the classical era. I was just in a normal age, so nothing really exciting here. Decided to go for Exodus of the Evangelist, because once you get a religion, Exodus of the Evangelist actually gets you a ton of era score just as you convert your own cities to your religion for the first time. So if you're going for any game where you're founding a religion, I would highly recommend going for this one in the classical era. It just gives you a lot of era score. I then made sure that I immediately started building a shrine in my capital, because I was a bit worried that I wasn't going to get a religion. And at this point, if my Patati Archer Rush didn't work out and I didn't get a religion, then it would make things a lot more difficult for me. I also decided at this point that since I wanted to go for to have a religion and then maybe use that, to use that extra faith to do some other things, I wanted to go for Void Singers, so I was kind of keeping my eyes out for a goody hut. And of course clearing all the barbarians that were, still spawning around me. So at this point I had finished the shrine in my capital. I wanted to check, so there's only been 2 religions founded, which means that there's still a decent chance that I would be able to found my own as well. But I took a look at the Great People screen, and I realized that there were a lot of people that were making a lot more great profit points per turn than me. And since, getting the religion is a huge part of what I've invested in already this game, you have to make sure that you get it. So if you're ever in a scenario like this where it's looking like it's a little bit close as to whether or not you're going to get your religion and it's important for your game, you just run some holy site prayers and I mean, you kind of just hope for the best. So that's exactly what I did here. Started running some holy site prayers and just hoped that I would be able to get a religion before these other people did. I also did happen to find a goody hut in the south, and I got lucky and I actually found Void Singers, so I didn't have any governor titles at the time of finding them, but whenever I did get a governor title, I did adopt them as my secret society for the game. Whenever I got early empire, I changed up my policy cards, so I went for colonization since I knew I was going to be building a lot of settlers. Whenever you're going for a peaceful early game, it's generally a pretty good thing to do. Just spam those settlers out real fast and get out as many cities as you can. And then I also got a builder in Faras and started improving the tiles. And man, I mean, we're only on turn 50, but the yields on these tiles are looking really good. 4 food, 2 production. The marsh tile was pretty good as well, so I started to work on a Temananki to make those yields even a little bit better. After finishing the first round of Holy Site Prayers, I took a look at the Great People screen, saw that I was still quite a ways away from actually getting my Great Profit, so I then just queued up another thing of Holy Site Prayers, because as I mentioned, whenever you start investing, I mean, I guess maybe it's the sunk cost fallacy, but when you start investing in going for a religion in the early game, you better make sure you get one, because otherwise you end up really far behind, you've wasted a lot of turns of production, and you get nothing out of it. Then, since I knew that it was going to be a peaceful game, I spent some time to plan out my cities. So I guess I'll talk about city planning real fast. So I generally like to put cities either 4 or 5 tiles away from each other, depending on how much space I have. Like, if I'm going to get more than, I would say, 8 or 9 cities, then I like to make them... I'll start making some of them 5 tiles apart, but I generally aim in a game to have like 8 or 9 or even 10 cities. There's really not much of a point in having less than 7, I would say. You should always try to get at least 7 and get as many as you can, because in Civ 6, there's not a huge penalty to having a lot of cities. So, yeah, I was just planning out some of these cities as best as I can, you know, trying to just get some good settling spots, put some of them next to the desert tiles that I had. Unfortunately, I had to get, I did plan out one that was kind of not so great up here next to this oasis, but if you have the space, you might as well use it, because just getting 1 extra district, maybe 1 extra campus, still is worth having another city. Whenever the next round of Holy Site Prayers finished, I looked at the Great People screen and I saw I was still like roughly 10 points away from getting the Great Profit, and I saw that a lot of people were a lot closer than me, so I got very nervous that I wasn't going to get my religion, but fortunately just a few turns later I was still able to get my Great Profit. I think some of those people that were close had already recruited a Great Profit, so they were just kind of overflowing into the next, you know, round of Great Profit points after they had already founded their religion. So fortunately I was able to get a Great Profit and use them to found my religion. Did also upgrade Pingala. I got Researcher on Pingala because my capital was size 5, so 5 extra science per turn at this point is, you know, it basically like almost doubles my science per turn. Still makes me have like nothing compared to Vietnam, who was already in the 60s at this point, but that's okay. And yeah, as I mentioned before, I founded my religion, so of course I went for the glorious Snippy, the one that I always go for. I took Jesuit education because I knew at this point that I wanted to use my faith for something, so work ethic actually was still available, but since I didn't get desert folklore, I didn't bother with work ethic. So I took Jesuit education instead to be able to use my faith to purchase buildings in my campus districts, which is pretty strong whenever you're going for a science victory game. And then of course I went for cross-cultural dialogue, which gives you science from the number of followers you have. So this allows you to just spread your religion in your own territory and then effectively use your population to generate a bunch of extra science. I then quickly picked up a missionary, so one of the things you should do immediately after founding your religion, at least get 1 missionary and spread it to some of your other cities, because it's very easy to get to a point where your religion is taken out by somebody else's religion, because it only exists in your capital, and then when, you know, maybe you're just not paying attention, they convert your capital and then you're out of luck. So I bought a missionary early on and then just converted some of my cities to my religion just to make sure that I had at least a little bit of a buffer in case the religion from Vietnam was going to start, you know, expanding into my borders. So from this point, I was actually feeling pretty good about the early game so far. I mean, it wasn't the plan that I originally intended on of going for the Patati Archer Rush, and it also wasn't the secondary plan of getting Desert Folklore and Work Ethic, but the tertiary plan of just going for a religion and using Lady of the Reeds Marshes and still, you know, using that religion to augment a science game. That plan at least was, you know, had something going for it. So at this point, founded another city. I got another government, so I was able to get Classical Republic, which I feel like is just almost always the best for Nubia. I mean, if you're going aggressive, you can go Oligarchy, but aside from that, I would recommend Classical Republic. Ran some policy cards that I think are helpful for whenever you're playing a peaceful early game like this. And then I also did build my first Nubian pyramid next to El Kuru. So the yields on this one, on the floodplain tile, it's a 5 food, 2 production, 2 faith tile. To get that this early on in the game, that's, you know, a 9 yield tile. It's really strong, actually. So I feel like I actually quite often underrate how good the Nubian pyramid is. The amount of food that it gives is actually pretty substantial. Did also do some more planning here, so I was planning for a government plaza hexagon because these cities that are in the desert they basically have no opportunities to get some adjacency, so you have to make district adjacency on your own. So I figured these 3 cities over here were probably going to be the best 3, or the 3 that would be most suited to the government plaza hexagon. So this at least will give you, +2 or +3 bonuses on most of the cities. And it's important to plan this out early on before you accidentally start placing districts down without even realizing it. And then a few turns later, I was able to build a Temenanki, which I was actually quite pleased with. I was worried I wasn't going to get it because it was already like turn 80, but a Temenanki is actually not a terribly difficult wonder to build, even though it is an early game wonder. So yeah, I finished this one up, and man, just look at the yields on these tiles early on. 4 food, 3 production, 1 science. Man, the yields were just so good for this early on in the game, and I was pretty happy with this. I then put another Nubian pyramid down, and I mean, just look at that. 5 food, 3 production, 2 faith, 1 science. It doesn't get much better than this in terms of early game desert yields. So, yeah, I was pretty pleased with how everything was going, even though it wasn't the initial plans. But then basically like 2 turns later, it all got ruined because a massive flood came through and basically destroyed every single tile improvement I had built. So I was not exactly happy with that one. Luckily, I still had a builder to repair the tile improvements, but it was a little bit of work to do so. And then, yeah, just a few turns later, we were on into the medieval era, into a golden age. So this about ended the early game. For the medieval era, I took monumentality because having a lot of faith, it's very useful to use that faith to purchase builders and settlers. This allows you to expand, especially when you're playing just a nice passive game like this. Getting free settlers, or not really free, but discounted settlers with faith rather than production speeds up your rate of expansion quite a lot. So that's, of course, what I took in this era. Yeah, as I mentioned, basically the end of the early game here. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at the mid game, see exactly what happens in a mid game as Nubia, and see what can happen with some religious some religious conversion woes, shall we say. You'll see plenty of that in the next episode. So thank you everyone for watching. I've been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for some more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.